2 weeks ago, I left my old company without notice, thinking they would easily find someone to replace me. But little did I know, that decision ended up causing a major contract loss for the company, leading to a series of financial troubles they now have to face. At first, I just wanted to escape a toxic work environment, but I never expected to become the catalyst that pushed the company into an even worse situation. What really happened? I decided to leave my old company without giving notice. This wasn't an easy decision, but I felt it was the only choice after enduring a toxic work environment for so long. Initially, I just wanted to escape a company that was constantly tightening the budget, filled with unprofessional people, and most importantly, a company that didn't respect its employees' value. I couldn't bear to stay there another second. The reason I didn't give notice was simple. The company had a habit of firing employees who were in their notice period. I clearly remember a time when a colleague was let go just a week after informing the company he would be leaving in 2 weeks. The constant feeling of uncertainty, not knowing if I would be the next victim once I submitted my resignation, weighed on me every day. So, I decided not to give notice. I just wrote a short resignation letter and sent it to my manager, informing them I would leave immediately. While there was some anxiety, I felt a sense of relief that I was finally leaving them. That morning, when I walked into the office for the last time, I was in a daze. There were no warm farewells from colleagues, no thank yous. I just packed up my things, neatly folded everything, and walked out without any regret. The company would easily find someone to replace me. After all, they were already replacing key departments with short-term contracts and hiring people who weren't even full-time employees. That was their strategy. And I wasn't the first to leave, so I was sure they'd find someone to fill my position. Before I left, I had to walk through other departments where I had worked. As I passed by my old colleagues, I noticed they were looking at me strangely. A few of them just lowered their heads, avoiding eye contact, while others couldn't hide their curiosity. I didn't know what they were thinking, but I could tell they were frustrated with what had been happening at the company. All the tension from the past few months, the unreasonable decisions, the empty promises, and the lack of respect for employees, it all led me to this decision. As I walked out of the company doors for the last time, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Even though I hadn't said goodbye, I knew I had made the right choice. The company wasn't worth my time, and I believed there were better opportunities waiting for me ahead. But I couldn't have imagined that this decision would have such a far-reaching impact, that changing everything at the company in ways I never expected. After I quit my job, I didn't give much thought to what would happen to my old company. I just wanted to escape a toxic work environment where I wasn't valued and was constantly disrespected. I assumed the company would continue operating as usual, since they had many other employees and ongoing projects. However, a week after I left, I happened to run into an old colleague who had worked with me there. Our conversation completely shocked me, as I learned about the unexpected consequences of my decision. According to my friend, the company faced a major financial blow right after I left. At first, I was a little concerned, but when I heard the details, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Not only had the company lost an important contract, but they had also lost a major project with the city government. When I heard this, I could hardly believe it. I had been involved in the planning stages of this project, and I knew just how critical it was to the company. They had carefully planned for it, and I was an integral part of its execution. The project had been scheduled months in advance, and I was the one assigned to handle the work. When I abruptly left without notice, the company struggled to find someone to replace me. Initially, I didn't understand why it would be such a big deal, but my friend explained that the company simply couldn't find anyone qualified and experienced enough to step into my role quickly. They tried to find a replacement, but it became even more complicated because the company refused to pay higher wages than their competitors. My old company always had a policy of paying lower wages than the industry standard, and this made it difficult for them to hire people with the necessary skills and experience who would accept such low pay. The more I heard, the more surprised I became. They had greatly underestimated my importance in these major projects. The company couldn't find anyone to take my place, and in the end, they decided to delay the project, hoping they would find a solution over time. But instead of finding a quick fix, they opted to adjust the project schedule and extend the timeline, hoping that a solution would appear. However, this delay frustrated their client, the city government, who eventually decided to cancel the contract. The company lost an important source of revenue and faced severe consequences from this decision. What really shocked me was that my departure didn't just affect one project or contract, it highlighted the flaws in the company's human resources strategy. They had become too dependent on a few individuals like me to maintain large contracts, but they had no backup plans and weren't prepared with enough staff to step in. If they had really focused on building a strong team and developing their talent, I might not have been the deciding factor in this failure. They had ignored many warning signs about their staffing issues and lacked a long-term plan for replacing employees who could leave at any moment. Hearing all of this, I couldn't stop thinking about my decision to leave. While I didn't intend to cause these consequences, perhaps it was the company's disrespect and unfair treatment of me that ultimately led to their downfall. I couldn't help but wonder if the company would ever recognize its mistakes and learn from this experience. Either way, the change had happened, and perhaps that was the result of them never truly appreciating the real value of their employees. When I heard about the consequences the company faced after I quit, I couldn't stop thinking about the reasons I left. Although I didn't intend to cause trouble for anyone, the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I had endured a lot during my time there. The unfair decisions made by the company pushed me to leave, and now I could see how those injustices had contributed to the collapse of what they were trying to build. The reason I decided to leave wasn't just the toxic work environment, but also because the company forced me to accept a salary far below my worth. Initially, I had a clear agreement with them about my salary, but after some time, they decided to replace my entire department with contract work. This made my position increasingly unstable, and the commitments they had made to me gradually became meaningless. When they promised I would get a promotion and additional certifications, it was all empty talk. They never really cared about my career development. They just wanted me to work for far less than I deserved. This made me feel like I no longer had value within the company. I worked hard and contributed significantly to important projects, but I wasn't compensated fairly. When they continued firing employees and cutting benefits, I realized that the company only cared about profits and didn't pay attention to its employees. That's when I started feeling frustrated and couldn't bear it any longer. I decided to quit and look for a new job, somewhere I could be recognized and grow. Leaving was not an easy decision. I knew that if I stayed, I would just continue facing disrespect and injustice at work. Not long after I quit, the company started cutting costs by replacing me and others with contract work. Although I wasn't there to see it, I knew that this change would only make things worse. Moreover, the company's complete disregard for the needs and rights of its employees made me realize something crucial. They always encouraged staff to accept salary cuts, but never truly compensated for the losses workers had to bear. The salary they paid me was only a small fraction of what I was contributing. This wasn't just unfair, it was disrespectful to the employees. Even though I didn't intend to create chaos, all these truths became clearer than ever. The company had been too greedy and didn't focus on the development of its employees. I was just one of many who had to bear the consequences of their greed. Their decisions, from replacing employees with contract workers to not offering fair pay, had created a series of problems that couldn't be fixed. And now, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction seeing the company face the difficulties they had brought upon themselves. Although I never intended to cause the company to fall into such a difficult situation, when I heard about the consequences of my decision to quit, I couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Especially when I learned that my departure directly impacted a crucial contract the company had signed with the city. Hearing this, I couldn't help but wonder if my leaving had truly been worth it. The story I heard from my old colleague made me feel even more that I couldn't continue ignoring the problems within the company without taking action. Their lack of caution in replacing me led to a serious mistake: the decision to delay the project schedule. This, in turn, ruined the relationship between the company and the important city government partner, leading to the cancellation of the contract. If only they had adjusted slightly and found a reasonable solution, perhaps they wouldn't have faced such serious consequences. But from what I understood, the delay wasn't just a scheduling issue. The company actually had at least 2 people in the office who could have stepped in to replace me immediately. The problem wasn't a lack of staff, but rather that they didn't want to pull those people from their other projects, or more simply, didn't want to pay for an external contractor. They were trying to maximize profits and avoid any additional costs, even though they knew this could jeopardize important work. The reason was simply financial gain, even though they had the resources to address the issue. I could understand this choice if the company were facing financial difficulties. However, what I couldn't accept was that they treated employees as mere tools to be replaced for profit. They overlooked critical factors like maintaining customer relationships and service quality. In reality, the company failed to see the price they would pay for their greed and lack of foresight. This made me truly feel sorry for the colleagues who remained, those who were carrying the burden of the leadership's poor decisions. These people were working hard but not being properly recognized. The company not only neglected salary issues but also failed to create an environment for employees to grow. It made me realize that my decision to leave was the right one, even though the consequences might have made me feel a bit guilty. However, I also couldn't deny that a part of me felt satisfaction in seeing the company face the difficulties caused by their own greed and poor judgment. They had let profit control too much, overlooking the fundamental values of work and partnership. I don't regret my decision, even though I may never know the full extent of the impact it caused. Although I never intended to cause such serious consequences for the company, when I heard the stories from my old colleagues, I couldn't deny that a part of me felt satisfied seeing them struggle due to their own greed and lack of foresight. The company losing the contract and facing severe financial problems after I left was truly a shock for them. They never expected that my departure would trigger such a series of unforeseen events. I realized that everything that happened wasn't because of a lack of staff or resources, but because they placed too much emphasis on profit and overlooked important factors like partnerships and job stability. They weren't prepared for my departure, and this led to a major failure on their part. This situation made me reflect more on how the company had been run all along. It seemed that they were only concerned with short-term gains and didn't realize the long-term cost they would incur. One of the things that surprised me the most was that the company chose not to use capable employees to replace me immediately. They had at least 2 people on the team who could have done my job with minimal issues. However, they decided not to use them and instead chose to delay the project schedule. This frustrated me even more because it was clear they had a better option. But due to financial reasons and the reluctance to incur extra costs, they chose the worst solution. It was this lack of preparation and indecision that caused everything to collapse. The company lost an important contract because of that poor decision. And this loss not only affected them financially, but also tarnished their reputation in the industry. They had built an unreliable image in the eyes of their clients and partners, and this could have long-lasting effects. I couldn't help but think about this, and wonder whether they would ever realize their mistakes and change their management approach. While I can't change what happened, I also couldn't help but feel that my decisions were a reflection of how the company had treated me throughout my time there. I left behind a company that didn't respect its employees, lacked fairness, and didn't create a growth environment. They were too focused on financial profit and neglected the most important aspect of any organization: the people. Perhaps they will never realize the connection between my departure and the struggles they now face. But for me, It's a valuable lesson about how the company operated and the price they paid for not treating workers fairly. What I went through only made me more confident in my decision, and I know that company will never return to what it once was.